Well, good afternoon, everyone. Friday. So, yeah. So today is going to be an interesting topic. And I say that because, depending on who you talk to, will depend on who thinks that you should talk about this particular subject or not. So today, I want to talk about our President Biden, falling a lot. Now, the latest one was at the graduation of the Air Force Academy, the current class of 2023. And just not a good look. I'm just going to say that. Now, depending on who you talk to, somebody had said that Christians shouldn't be saying anything about it. Well, okay. If you're being, derogatory, no, of course you shouldn't say anything about it, because Christians shouldn't be doing anything derogatory. But this is my feeling on this. The president is the leader, quote unquote, of the free world. Probably one of the most influential people in the world. And when you potentially could be suffering from something mental, physical, whatever it is, and this is not the first time you've fallen, whether it be from a bike or trying to get into Air Force One or whatever it might be, the look is not good. Okay? The leader of any nation should project themselves as being a strong leader, not only mentally, but physically. Okay? We've had older presidents, Ronald Reagan being one of them. But he didn't present himself as somebody who was weak. Even though he was up in age. He didn't really start suffering until after he got shot. Then everything wasn't the way it used to be. But Ronald Reagan still carried himself with poise. He carried himself strong. Even if he wasn't necessarily physically strong, he carried himself in such a way where world leaders didn't think of him as physically weak. So, but our current president is viewed as weak because physically he looks weak. He looks weak. He has fallen many times. His speeches are a bunch of run-on sentences that sometimes don't make any sense. I personally think he's suffering from dementia, at least early on. At least early on stage dementia, potentially even Alzheimer's. I think there's something physically wrong with him, but nobody wants to admit it, especially the folks that voted for him. They think he's fine. He's not fine. He is not fine by any stretch of the imagination. But nobody wants to make the hard decision, nor him personally, of saying, you know what, I am physically and mentally not up to task to continue to be the President of the United States. Now, of course, people who didn't vote for him don't want the Vice President either, but that's what the Vice President is for. Whether you like her politics or not, which I do not, she at least would give a much stronger appearance to the office than our current president. Physically. Whether you agree with her politics or not is irrelevant. It's the look of a leader that makes just as much of an impact as their decisions. Because how people view your leader is important. And I guarantee you, China, Russia, and other countries that don't like us are viewing our president as a weakling and as weak. And they're probably right. And again, I'm not making any disparaging comments or derogatory comments to our Commander-in-Chief and the President of the United States. I'm just giving you my opinion of what I see and what I think is going on. I bring this up because his fall was again public in the Air Force Academy graduation. The Commander-in-Chief speaking at a Service Academy graduation. And then while at the graduation, falls on stage, seen by thousands and thousands of people. Not a good look. Irregardless if it was his fault or not. Something is not right. Something's not right. And yet, he wants to run again. I don't understand that. Some people need to know when it's time. And we have a lot of issues with this in the church, whereas pastors don't want to give it up until they die because they're afraid of what might happen. Or that there's no, what's the word I'm looking for? There's nobody to hand off to. They don't have any good enough people to hand the church off to. So one, they feel obligated to continue to pastor. And two, they don't want to give it up to somebody who they don't feel can take over. Which is a lot of churches, actually. There's a lot of churches that have no succession process whatsoever. They're not being groomed, or they don't have competent people to do it. So hence, even though they feel they should retire or even want to retire, they cannot because they don't have the people to take over. There's no succession process in place. And heck, there are even some churches where they might have competent people, but the competent people don't want it. So again, they feel they're obligated to continue. Okay? I'm one of those. I don't want it. That's not my calling to be a pastor. I don't want it. Okay? It's not that I'm not capable, it's that I don't want it. So, because our government does have a succession process in place on the off chance that the president is found either physically or mentally incapable to continue in office, I'm not sure why our current president doesn't feel that he doesn't feel that he's. Well, let me rephrase it. I don't know why our current president feels he's still capable. Something is obviously wrong. Something is wrong when your speeches just meander and just go off tangents and you don't know what he's talking about. Okay, that's a sign. And then this is not the first time he's fallen in public. That's a sign. It's a sign that you may need to go on and either make the tough decision and resign, or that you need to be evaluated by a medical professional, by the White House doctors, or a third party, which would be preferable because the White House doctors may not be the right people because they have a vested interest in the president continuing, unless they're honest doctors, which we don't know, because every president brings in their own, physician. I don't think the physician stays in place. Well, I'm sorry, there is a White House physician that probably stays in place, but the presidents obviously do retain their own private physicians. Okay, so the White House physician may need to do an exam to find out if he's mentally and physically capable. If the physician finds out that he, in his medical opinion, is still able, there still is an issue. There's still an issue, and potentially Congress could get involved. I personally think that, though, his time is almost up, so, it's a little late for that now, but I personally think that his physicians and advisors should advise him not to run. because it's obvious there's something wrong. And again, it doesn't matter whether you agree with him or not because, you're of the other party or whatever. I don't care. I could care less about that. My coming on today is the obvious concern that there is something physically and mentally wrong with our current president. And either the president doesn't see it or doesn't want to admit it, or his staff doesn't see it or doesn't want to admit it because they may lose their jobs. And they want to continue with their jobs. See, the problem with politics is the people that work for the politician are all about staying in that position because not only of the money, but because of the influence. When they can't just be honest and be actual honest advisors and tell them, say, you know what, we have a problem here and we need to get you checked out. You may want to consider not running for a second term because it's becoming obvious that you have a problem. And even if you don't necessarily have a problem, it's being perceived that you do by foreign countries and enemies of the state. And you really can't get anything done when people perceive you as weak. The president should be perceived of as strong, regardless of what party they come from. You might not have liked President Obama, but he wasn't perceived as being weak, at least physically and mentally. President Obama carried himself well, he looked good, and he carried himself like a president of the United States, irregardless if you agree with his views or not, or his decisions. It doesn't matter. He carried himself well. Both President Bushes carried themselves, for the most part, physically and mentally well. President Reagan did. President Clinton did. For the most part, most presidents carried themselves as leaders physically and mentally. We're not even talking about what they believe in or their parties or whatever. That's not what I'm talking about. That's a whole nother subject matter. I'm just talking about their public perception. Okay, that's what we're talking about today. President Biden's public perception when it comes to other countries looking at him. Do they consider him weak? And I would say yes, they do. Heck, even our allies probably consider him weak. President Roosevelt, because of public perception, they hid his physical disability from the public so that he would not be perceived as weak. That's when we actually used to care about perception, or the other country's perception of our leader. These days, obviously, they don't care because it's obvious something's wrong with President Biden. And again, this has nothing to do with his decision making or beliefs, or his party for that matter. It's all about other countries' perception of our leader in our country. And as the leader of this country, you should be perceived as strong, not weak, and somebody that people respect. You don't have to fear people. We don't want necessarily fear out of people. We want respect. But I, unfortunately, in my opinion, don't think countries and people think of our president as strong, even our allies, because of the obvious physical and mental issues that we see publicly on television. And even if what happened at the Air Force Academy was a fluke, it's not the first time it's happened. So there's a pattern. Anytime the same thing happens more than a couple of times, it's a pattern. I think people say if you do something in threes or whatever it is, it becomes a pattern. It's a pattern. And people with any common sense would say he does not need, because it's a little late in the game now, he does not need to run for a second term. Enjoy your retirement. Enjoy the fact that you became president. Enjoy the fact that you've been a civil servant for decades and decades and decades. And just enjoy your wife, enjoy your grandkids, and just carry on. But people have a hard time letting go. We all can be probably accused of doing that in one aspect or another. But when it's time to go, you need to have enough. You need to admit to yourself that it's time. Some people don't know how to let go. Politicians are the main ones that do not know how to let go. Politicians do not believe, especially modern day politicians, do not believe in what's best for their country. They don't want to give up power. That's the problem. President Biden don't want to give up his power. He don't want to give up his position and prestige, whatever little prestige is left. My opinion. You may disagree. That's okay. My opinion. He doesn't want to give up the power. He's being probably bullied by not only his vice president, but his advisors and his party in staying in, even though they see the same thing I'm seeing. What sense does that make? What is best for the country? Don't run for a second term. The Democratic Party needs to endorse somebody who's younger and has a better presence. Now, whether they win or not, that's up to the voters. Prayerfully, that's up to the voters. Okay? Prayerfully, that's up to the voters. So, I think that, in my opinion, being that it's a little late now, but that President Biden does not need to be running for a second term. He is not physically or mentally capable of continuing on with the presidency. Because what's happening now is only going to get worse as you get older. Alzheimer's and dementia, in most cases, only gets worse. How do I know? Because my grandparents had both. And it's extremely debilitating. It's extremely difficult to deal with. And it's extremely sad. It was very difficult on me to see my grandparents, who all my life were strong and thrived and loved to throw parties and do all the great, wonderful things that retirees love to do. To see them reduced to absolutely nothing is some of the worst things you could ever experience in your life. My mother is currently in hospice and is showing the first signs of dementia and Alzheimer's. She won't admit to it, but I know what it looks like because I've been through it. And it's very difficult for me. It was difficult with my grandparents. It's going to be more difficult with my parents. I was blessed to have both my parents and grandparents for many years of my life. For most of my life. Over half of my life. I had both sets of grandparents and my parents alive. Definitely all of my childhood. And a portion of my adult life after high school. How much of a blessing is that? And then when my grandfather passed away, my grandmother lived to 101. My father's mother. And my mother's parents lived into their early 90s. How much of a blessing is that? I pray I live as long as they do. I got great genes. I fully expect to live in my 90s and 100s. I fully expect it. But for our president to be physically and mentally, there's something wrong physically and mentally with him. And again, I'm not saying that it's his fault. I'm saying it's just life. Part of old age is dealing with these physical and mental issues as you get older. It's just part of life. Some people have it worse than others. Everybody is different. Okay? Everybody is different. Oh, shoot. Everybody is different. Right? Everybody is different. And so, in my opinion, for what I'm seeing and for what I've seen, he does not need to run for a second term. And it's foolish for him to do so. Do what's best for the country and do not run for a second term. It's bad enough we're seeing what we're seeing in your current term. Do not run for a second term. Let somebody younger run for office in your party. Let them nominate somebody else for the Democratic ticket. Do what's best for the country. But unfortunately, politicians don't do what's best for the country. They do what's best for them. And that's on both sides of the aisle. That's why politicians are some of the most hated people in the world besides car salesmen. Because they do what's best for them. They say one thing and do another. And that's on both sides. That's why sane people don't run for politics. And if they do, they either get out quickly or get corrupted. So, and it's a shame because we need good people in politics. So, that's my spiel on the recent fall of President Biden. Not the first one. Okay? It is an embarrassment to the country, even if it's not the president's fault. The perception is that he's a weak president, both mainly physically. I guarantee China and Russia see him as weak. And we don't need China and Russia to see our leader weak, because then we can't get stuff done. Okay? So, hey, if you got a comment, be respectful, leave it below. Again, we're not talking about his politics. We're talking about his mental and physical well-being. And the perception of our leader to the world. That's what's important, and that's what this video is about. I could care less about the politics right now. The politics are irrelevant. Oh, man. Let's see here. The politics are irrelevant. And so, yeah, if you have any comments, leave them below. Please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell, share with your friends. I'd love to gain more subscribers, maybe get some ideas. I know YouTube is moving more towards this short format, so I'm trying to do this the short format. I'm on Rumble as well, so check me out on there. Go ahead and visit my son's website. It's in the description below. philmartin.org. That's PHILL Martin, MARTIN.org. I guarantee you'll love his stuff. He's doing great, wonderful things. My son is an absolute genius. And so, hopefully, I'll get some comments about this. What do you think about his physical and mental state? Not his political leanings or whatever. I could care less right now. Just his physical and mental state and the perception that he's giving off to the rest of the world. That's what I want to get comments about. All right. So until next time, everyone, y'all have a great, wonderful weekend. And I will hopefully see y'all back again on Monday. God bless you.